Hi everyone, my name is Precious and we'll be talking about food insecurity in Africa. In this presentation, we shall look at how food insecurity moved from a mega mess to a mega crisis. We will also look at the paradigms of understanding food insecurity and how it was managed. And then we are going to look at um, disciplines and industries involved in trying to mitigate the effect of food insecurity and also talked about the communication channels and the politics behind it. Is food insecurity a mega crisis or a mega mess? So, when we look at the situation of food insecurity after COVID, we can see how it has gradually transformed from what was already a mega mess into a full blown mega crisis of some sort of hunger. There is a realization that the pandemic did not create the food insecurity in most developing countries, but rather it exposed the pre existing issues like aging of farming population, the perishable nature of agricultural goods, and the heavy dependence on um, food importation. At the peak of the pandemic, we saw lockdowns, border closures, and supply food chain disrupted, and that caused food prices and living expenses to skyrocket all over the world, including developing nations. And this negatively impacted the economic lives of many people, especially women, since in most places women played a secondary role in the society. So we are going to look at the different kinds of paradigms that can be focused on when looking at food insecurity as a crisis. To most developing nations, deciding on the right actions to curtail and limit the impact of a crisis and the economic social costs of restricting the risk was overwhelming during the COVID. So during the COVID pandemic, it was observed that most leaders applied some kind of traditional crisis where the focus was to solve the most urgent issue and then the least urgent until there is nothing else to solve. But then there was a realization that that process was not sufficient to address the COVID crisis and its complexity. So, using that as an example, it means that with the way food insecurity is deeply intertwined in so many different directions, I think that the traditional method of looking at solving the food insecurity issue shouldn't be followed. But then there must be a shift in our thinking towards what I call crisis of understanding and apply intentional measures which could be community led so that we can provide long-term solutions to mitigate food insecurity issues, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. The next thing we will talk about is disciplines and industries that are heavily involved in mitigating food insecurity within Africa, and we shall look at the um, World Food Program for their active role in trying to prevent this crisis from happening. But you would agree with me that food insecurity is a result from a long-term neglect of most developing nations' agribusiness and inconsistency in the food supply chain. I'm aware that international organizations such as the World Food Program have genuine interest in ending world hunger, but how they communicate these programs eventually ends up changing the way the people perceive them to be. In some developing countries, these programs do not align with their culture, and I think that the time has come for international organizations to understand the effects of their initiatives on the people. Before an initiative is rolled out, maybe a community engagement would provide the cultural information which is needed to advise them to better structure their programs so that they can achieve their goals and also receive the support they need from their beneficiaries. Speaking of sharing information to beneficiaries, we would look at the communication channels and challenges faced. And I'm going to use Ghana as a case study in this. So, um, communication is crucial aspect of development in most developing country, and I mean in the whole entire world. Communication is crucial for a nation's development because it informs the public of alarming issues, in our case, food insecurity and other impending doom. However, various governments and their allies heavily regulate sharing information through gatekeepers within the national or the traditional media. The topic of food insecurity is barely mentioned, and when it's done, the narrative is forced and is inconsistent with the views shared by the public on social media, which tends to be the only platform where it is not heavily regulated by the government. An example of this inconsistent messaging of food insecurity in Ghana is when the president of Ghana at that time Nana Akufo-Addo spoke about food insecurity at the United Nations Food Summit. In his statement, he acknowledged that Ghana's food systems are not meeting the need of its people and needs to be transformed. Still, on the other hand, on My Joy News Online reported that the former Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Mahomia, claimed that Ghana was on the list of countries with zero hunger when he engaged the youth. So this kind of proves the inconsistent nature of food insecurity as a topic in Ghana's media and other communication channels. This kind of leads me to wonder if food insecurity as a topic is a weapon or a way to keep the people in some kind of um, wanting to have more but to not receive more, because with the kind of example cited when the president actually said that there was a need when he had to get grants from people, but within the country there is a no notion that there is actually food safety going on, leaves me to think about what the government or what politics is actually being played in this regard. So, to conclude on this, I'll say that the food insecurity crisis just demands paradigm shift towards understanding and collaboration, and also applying of sustainable solutions, which would not just be determined by the president or people in government, but also a collective action by the people. We need a community-oriented long-term strategies. We also need to empower women and address systematic inequalities within the the societies or the nations that struggle with food insecurity. And most importantly, we need urgent and sustained efforts to address and mitigate this crisis. Thank you for watching.